to make a tutorial on the basics of FL Studio and how to wrap your head around it. So if you don't have any idea what you're doing, this should hopefully help you and unconfuse you on how it all works. I go over how the sequencer works and how the mixer works and how the playlist works and how the browser works at its core. I also touch on how the piano roll works. The first thing I want to explain is the sequencer. This is where you make little bits of your song. So this is where you make your drum patterns, this is where you make pretty much everything. And each one of these is called a pattern, which you can change by using this little slider up here. So in one pattern, you might have a simple drum pattern, and in the other pattern, you might have a melody or something. So to make things as simple as possible, I'm going to show you how to make a simple drum beat, and then we're going to put a piano over it so you can learn how to make melodies and put it all together into a playlist. So the first thing we are going to do is I want you to notice that each of these, every 4 stands for a beat. So for those of you who don't know, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 when you're counting, like the tempo. So I can prove this to you by using the metronome, which is right up here. And yes, FL Studio does come with a metronome. It's pretty awesome. The icon looks a little bit like weird. Oh, it looks a little like a little stick you hit a gong with. Anyway, so if you select metronome, you will hear the counting. Now each little click you hear stands for a beat. So now we're going to make our simple pattern. Something not too crazy. So some of you might not have this set up. So what I'm going to do now is start from complete scratch, so you can learn how all of this works. So I'm going to delete all these channels. Now we're going to use this. This is the browser. This is where you can listen to all your samples they have and just find a quick kick of some sort. I'm having a little trouble finding one, so it's a perfect excuse to show you how to use the find feature. So I usually use Smart Find. So when you hit Smart Find, you type in what you want to find. So kick. And it's going to bring you to the first thing it can find. Now, if you listen to that, if that's the kick you want, then you would just drag it on. You simply click it and drag it onto the project. So I'm going to use that kick just for demonstration reasons. I'm going to rename that to kick. So if you want to rename something, you right click and hit rename. You can also color it. So I'll make this green, just cause. Now the next thing we're going to want is a snare. So we're going to select that, and we're going to drag it on right onto the sequencer. Make that green as well. Now let's find a hat. Now let's say that's not the sample that you want. See right here, find next. It'll find the next result for you. I'll use that for demonstration. I'm gonna rename that to hat. It's a good habit to rename all your stuff, because as you can tell, like when I dragged the kick on, it said GRV, kick, 01, whatever. It makes it more simple if you just rename it right when you drag it on, just to make it simple. So now we have our kick, our snare, and our hat. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a simple pattern. So as you know, these are all beats. So on the first beat, I'm going to have a kick, and on the second, I'm going to have a snare. So all you do is left click to enable it, and right click to delete it. So left click enables it, and right click disables it. So I'm just going to fill these in. It's a pretty simple kick. Pretty simple pattern. So now we're going to fill these in. Now you might not, maybe you're just too lazy to fill all these in. So an easy way to do this is you can fill it, use a fill option. So you can either fill it every 2 steps, every 4 steps, or every 8 steps. For this particular exercise, I'm going to use 2 steps. So that's a pretty simple pattern to work with. So now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take this pattern, and you can also rename patterns too. So I'm going to rename this to drum pattern _01. That's just how I name it. I recommend you name it to make it easier to get back to. See, my name is applied there. And we want to put this on a playlist so we can start making a song out of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to view, and the first thing you see is playlist, and the shortcut is F5. So if you press F5, there it is, right there. Now we are going to take this pattern and we're going to put it here. Now just for future reference, if this wasn't selected, you can hit this little down arrow, and all of your patterns will be listed here. You can also get to this by right clicking here, the same list right there. Now it works pretty much the same way as the sequencer. So you left click to add the pattern into the playlist. You right click it to delete it. But we're gonna make 4 of these. So if you want to make 4 of these just by dragging it, you have to make sure you're using the paint tool. This allows you to just hold it down, hold the mouse down and drag it out, and it automatically puts it in for you. Now if you don't want to do that, you want to place it individually, you use this, the pencil tool or draw tool. So you can fill in each one manually. So now this is going to be our basic song. So as you'll notice, you have a pattern select and a song select. Now this is just telling you where you're playing from. So if this is on pattern, it's going to play the pattern that is currently selected. So if you hit play, it plays that. Now if you go to an empty pattern, you'll see it plays that. No audio because nothing's there, obviously. So, bring this back up to our pattern. But we want it to play from the playlist, which is what song is. So we're going to select song, and we're going to hit play. Now it plays from the playlist, which is what we want it to do. Now, as a quick tip, you can take this track, you can rename it to something like drums. That's how I do it. You can really arrange it any way you want, whatever works for you. This is just how I do it. Now, the playlist is pretty straightforward. Don't make it harder than it is. This is basically where you arrange the song, how you add different parts in, and how you can cut these patterns short without actually modifying the actual pattern, stuff like that. You have all these tools up here, which you'll get acquainted with, but the main one I use is the cut tool, or slice. So when you have the slice tool selected, you can pretty much chop up your patterns in the playlist. Like that. It's just an easy way to chop up your patterns and play it how you want it to be played. So now we have our drums. Now we're going to make a melody to go along with these drums. So when you insert a new instrument, how you do that, besides dragging a sample onto the sequencer, you right click on one of the channels, you hit insert, where you go to insert, and you have all your instruments. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to use FL keys because everybody has that. It comes with FL Studio. So now we have our keys in here, and I'm just going to rename it to piano, just to make things a little more simple. So now how you make a melody is you right click, you hit piano, you check this off, and now you have the piano roll window where you can make patterns and all that fun stuff. Make melodies. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a simple melody. So now there's our simple melody. And to make this a little more easier for future reference, I'm going to rename this to piano. Or rather, piano melody. And we want to put this in our song, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to hit F5 to bring out the playlist. We are going to make sure piano melody is selected, or whatever pattern you put your melody in. And we just draw it on the same way we did with the drums. To make this more simple, I will rename this to piano. So now if we play it all back, nothing too fancy, but it should give you a general idea of how this works. So to sum everything up, each one of these is a little bit of your song, a little piece of it. And each of these little pieces, it's placed on the playlist, which is what creates your song. Now there's multiple ways to create a song. You don't have to use the playlist if you don't want to. You can use a single pattern. Some people actually do that. But most people do it this way, so you can find out what works best for you. So that is basically how all of this works together. Now, the other thing you need to know about is the mixer, which is where you put all your equalizers and your effects, your phasers, and stuff like that. Usually, by default, you always have a limiter on a master channel, so we won't get into that right now, but I will show you basic routing. So, the mixer is made up of these things called inserts. Now each insert you can route something into it, and these little slots is where your effects go. So let's say I want to route my kick into insert 1. I'm going to right click, I'm going to rename it to kick just to make things a little more easier. Then I'm going to go back into my sequencer, I'm going to select the kick and make sure only the kick is selected. It's indicated by this little green light. And we are going to select the insert that we want to route it into. So how we do that is we're going to right click and we're going to go to link selected channels and we're going to select to this track. But as a more simple approach, you can just select the instrument that you want to put into an insert and you can hit Control L, which I'll demonstrate. So we're going to put our snare into insert 2. So you're going to select the snare, make sure only the snare is selected. We're going to hit Control L with the insert selected. And as you can see, it also carries the color and the name over. So we could have skipped having to name this. Now when you play your pattern back, you'll notice that your kick is now routed into here and your snare is routed into here. And we'll do the same with the hat. Now that is basic routing. Now this is just the volume of the instrument. So let's say I want to put an EQ on this kick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to either one of these slots, doesn't matter, unless you have multiple plugins, because then it depends where the signal goes. You might want to have it go through a certain plugin first before it gets to the master. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our EQ on the first slot. Now how this works is this is the input going from top to bottom. So the signal is going to go to this EQ, then it goes to slot 2 and then slot 3 and then slot 4 and slot 5 until it gets to the end, until it gets to the out, and then it goes straight to the master. So it goes down and then out to the master, unless you have it routed to somewhere else, which I'll go over later with more advanced routing. But this is basically how you put a plugin on a certain instrument and how you route instruments into the mixer. So if you wanted to, you could put a phaser on this, or reverb, or flanger. We'll put a flanger on it. Now it's a little hard to hear the kick. So what we're going to do is we're going to solo it. The easiest way to do this is you can simply go to it, this little green light, the little circle, and we're going to right click on it. This will mute everything else and will keep your kick playing. Now let's say you just want to hear your kick and your snare. So starting with what we did before, what we're going to do is we're going to right click the kick and we're going to left click the snare. And that is just a quick thing on how to solo. Now if you want to bring all these back, you basically just right click twice and it brings it all back for you. It doesn't matter which one you do it on. So if you solo this, just right click twice and it brings it all back for you. In another video I will go over what the mixer sends are, those 4 mixer tracks you see off to the right. So now I feel you should have a pretty basic understanding of how this all works. So to recap all of this, we have a pattern where we make a little bit of our song, maybe drums or a melody. We put it into our playlist. So we have our pattern, drum pattern going like this, straight across, and we have our piano melody going like this. And all of this is routed into the mixer. And just as a quick recap, the signal goes from top to bottom. So it goes from slot 1 to slot 2 to slot 3. And then it goes all the way down, and then it goes out, and you hear it in the master. You can also temporarily disable effects. So these little lights determine if it's enabled or disabled. Or you can use, it's kind of like a dry wet knob. So if you have an extreme amount of flanger, just turn this all the way up. Yeah, that's pretty extreme. You can bring this down to kind of minimize the effect without actually turning it off. So with it turned all the way down, it is the equivalent of it being muted. So we're going to reset this. We can also reset things by hitting right click and hitting reset. That will reset it for you. So now, that is basically how FL Studio works at its core. So you should have a pretty basic understanding of how this all works. So if you wanted to make a new drum pattern, like this, disable that flange. So now we have a new pattern. And you can put it wherever you want to arrange it. So I'll put it on the second measure. Oh yes, these are measures, by the way, for anyone who's into music theory. So you have your beats, and those form a measure, which is what the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is. So our bar, whichever terminology you use. So I have it on the second bar and the fourth bar. So now my pattern will play on the second measure and the fourth measure. And just real quick, I'll make a new melody. You can also duplicate a pattern. So you do this by right clicking and you hit clone. That will give you a new pattern, and it will be the same exact pattern that you copied. And it also takes the name, if you named it, and it puts a number 2 on it, or number 3, depending how many times you cloned it. So I'm just going to change this up a little bit. And this basically works how everything else does. You right click to place a note, and left click to place a note, and then right click to delete it. You also change the length of it by going at the edge. You can't do it here, but you can only do it at the end. So you can adjust this, and you can move it by just clicking on it. And that is basically how it all works. So I hope this little Kickstart tutorial helped you, and I hope it wasn't too long. I had a lot of fun explaining it, and hopefully you learned and you're not as nearly confused as you were before on how this works. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments, and I will be making more videos to go along with this. So until next time.